Welcome back to news, everybody. I've got a bunch of really fun stories for you today. Number one, Diablo 4. We've actually had some comment on modding, and a mod that was costing, I believe, $120 a year, which is a kind of insane situation. Then, Glorbo has returned, this time leaving World of Warcraft and entering Destiny 2. So, big news for Glorbo. Also, we've got Valve going in quite big with Team Fortress 2, and the launch of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, a game that was very much marketed as only really being possible in its full vision on a PS5 that is now running on a Steam Deck with an SD card. So we'll be able to see just how uncompromised that vision is when it's outside of its native hardware. To kick things off, though, I think we've got to talk about Diablo 4. So one of the big stories that caught on last week was dark patterns, right? And that's whenever a UI or, just the UX design, the way that buttons work and flow, whenever those leave people in a situation where they can accidentally make a purchase or spend a resource that they would have purchased with money, right? And the way that it worked with D4 is you could essentially purchase the battle pass with the token that likely came with the edition of the game that you purchased, but it would actually consume your token without giving you a yes or a no, right? So that was pretty damn bad. To a lot of people, this just looked like really deceptive design. What's happened here is the Diablo 4 developers have actually responded here. They have updated the activation of the premium pass with a confirmation pop-up, and I did take the plunge and I tested the pop-up to see if it works, and yes, it does. And the default focus, which is the button the controller first highlights, is the Season Journey button, not the Battle Pass. And that was the core thing. Whenever I went in, on my PS5, hit the button, it took me straight to the Season Journey, everything was fine. That it shipped in a way where the button defaulted to purchase and there was no confirmation to spend your token is completely insane and a humongous oversight at the very best. And it's not like they are above, right? They're not above this kind of deceptive design. One of the examples that I like the most is how Overwatch 2 weaponizes information to get more money out of people for really the same thing. So in Overwatch 2, if you go to the store, you'll see all the different skins, right? But most of the time, they're all in bundles. Now, a lot of people don't actually know that if you go into the hero browser or whatever it's called, you can actually or the skin gallery, the hero gallery, that's it. You can just buy the individual skins for say 1,800 Overwatch credits instead of perhaps the 2,600 that the store displays to you. But the store displays it just as a bundle with no obvious way to only buy the thing that you want. And obviously, if someone knows they're going to go and pick up a premium-priced skin, they're going to go to the store. They're not going to go to the hero gallery, right? Just another example. I think that's something that it's something they need to fix in Overwatch 2. But here, I can see this being a genuine oversight and something they're willing to change and fix. In Overwatch 2, that feels like outright deceptive design. And before we go to the death of mods, there is the major fix of, druids ended up apparently looking like this, which is insane, and that has now been fixed. But let's talk about mods and that kind of thing, right? So this comes from Adam Fletcher, and they just talk about being committed to keeping Sanctuary as a safe and fair place for all players. All D4 players agree to the Blizzard EULA, right? And it explicitly prohibits cheating, bots, hacks, or any other unauthorized software which automates, modifies, or otherwise interferes with the game. They talk about security and stuff, but the thing that is notable here is they specifically call out a user modification called Turbo HUD 4. They say that like any game modifying software, it is prohibited. People who install it will put their account at risk, and that can include a permanent suspension. Turbo HUD itself has been a thing in other games like D3 as an example. And what Turbo HUD 4 essentially was, right, is overlays and information. So they're saying trackers for gold XP and items, display of elites and regular mobs, as well as their fixes, a plugin system, which I think is probably where some of the main power is, as well as some D4 features like a toggleable plugin property thing, Helltide and World Boss timer displays, missed legendary counter, that kind of thing, right? That of course can act as a platform for other tools. Obviously, Blizzard want to nip that in the bud, and it's the kind of thing where if you look at a lot of user interface modifications in a game like Final Fantasy XIV, that's one of those things where generally speaking, they're not particularly good at detecting it. And there's a little bit of a like, yeah, you know, you can use a damage meter, you can't, and if you tell anyone that you use one and you're reported, you will get banned. But you know, it's like if you use it just for your own personal use, it seems you don't really get in trouble. Or in Guild Wars 2, there are loads of, because the game doesn't natively support add-ons, there are loads of like pretty advanced, like injected things that add way more UI functionality. It's one of those things in a very fast-paced, grindy game. People want that kind of information. The thing here, though, is Turbo HUD also had a subscription of $120, and that Reddit post that I saw talked about a free, a 12-hour trial license. That all does feel like really wrong, and I have to imagine for Blizzard that is going to accelerate them wanting to clamp down on that. I very much imagine, though, that the people who perhaps upfront purchased that $120 sub, maybe they're just screwed, because like if you go to the Turbo HUD website, it doesn't exist anymore. Hard to say. That being said, it's not like, it depends what payment processor was used, but chargebacks could be a thing there. But anyway, the TLDR here is no mods. This is not particularly surprising, though, given the type of online game that it is. So I'm not surprised. I didn't expect it. A version of this game that is, or at least has, offline-only features and also allows for mods, I'd be really excited about that. A version of this game that maybe had some sort of bizarre, modding, custom game browser, like even what Fortnite has. That would actually be pretty cool, but it's just not the game that Blizzard are making, right? It is a big live service game, and that does mean that there's a certain mold that it absolutely has to fit. Now, for good news, there is patch 1.1.1. To just quickly go over some things, it's got increased mob density, guaranteed legendary drops from dungeon bosses after level 35, a new stash tab costing 400,000 gold, which is barely any gold, elixir stacking up to 99, which is very nice for quality of life. They've also, and especially Cold Enchanted annoyed me whenever I was playing, just because of the way it didn't interact well with gameplay, I found. But yeah, Cold Enchanted, Backstabber, and Resource Drain have all been removed from the dungeon epics pool. They basically just said, these aren't really meeting our design goals, and they're not fun, so we removed them, which is definitely the sort of thing that I want to hear. And there's also fairly significant class changes that I'm sure there are some pros there. I'm sure there are also some cons. What's interesting to me, though, is the pace of these live streams. They are clearly treating this with a level of seriousness, at least as developers. It's one of those things, we might not all like the broad design direction of D4. We might not all like, of course, the larger corporate structure that's made that game. It does seem like the actual development team are trying, given what they have here. Even thinking about Season 1, how I think it definitely went below my expectations. And I've played it for a bit, and it's like, yeah, it's fine. I played a druid. Druid's fun. I have a Malignant Heart thing that gives me more wolves. That's cool. I like the wolves. It's not enough for me to keep on going, or to certainly just go grind that endgame. I want more things in that endgame, which definitely for me means, I saw ExileCon. Wow. They seem to have a truly incredible amount of content between their two games, and a very brave, bold decision. It does seem that Path of Exile 1 is going to continue to be the more zoomy style of, speedy sort of action RPG, whereas maybe PoE 2 is going to be like a bit more hardcore, a little bit more slowed down. Interesting stuff, very bullish in terms of content, and certainly it does show that, yes, Blizzard, the 500, I was about to say a 500-pound mammoth, that would be pretty light for a mammoth, but the humongous company of Blizzard, it's not like they have went and squished the poor little Kiwis. It's definitely not that. The Path of Exile team are in a position of strength. It really does seem to be the case. Okay, our next story then is a really great one. Sometimes things are rough in the internet, they're rough in gaming. We need a savior. We need someone to believe in. That someone is Glorbo. And the good news is that Glorbo has returned, this time gracing players of Destiny 2 with its resplendent and magnificent presence. Yes, because apparently it's a secret. in the game. Of course, to cut the jokes, the real story here is that there are loads of these AI, basically large language model driven sites that are scraping Reddit and turning it into just a humongous conveyor belt of mulchy trash, right? It is the worst of the worst. People talk about, you know, the dead internet theory, right? Nobody's really there on the internet. It's all an AI, just made for your own personal torment. And is that true? I don't think so. Can you see the seeds of it in these websites? Yes. So what happened is the World of Warcraft subreddit basically made a post about Glorbo. An AI picked it up thinking that Glorbo had came to World of Warcraft. Obviously, Glorbo does not exist. There is no Glorbo. And now the Destiny 2 community in their subreddit have decided to go and do the same thing. And of course, a scraping site, this time called Tech, briefly followed up with a now deleted post that said, you know, listen, players, this is where you can find the secret boss, Glorbo, in Destiny 2. And it did go about how Glorbo has emerged as a new focal point. But it's not just a strategy, it's also a secret boss. And one of the things I think, you know, that can maybe help you pick up in this stuff, because here it's very obvious, but there will be times where it's perhaps mixed into advertorial content, or maybe you are honest, like take Geo Media. They own a whole bunch of sites, including Kotaku and like Gizmodo and stuff, and they, at least the you know, the corporate people, have been trying to push very much, to the extreme annoyance of their editorial teams, some AI-driven articles. There was one about Star Wars that was just so embarrassing. It was a complete chronological order of Star Wars, but the chronological order was wrong, right? It was so weird. But eventually, this stuff will be harder to pick up. But just note, like, the severe bullshit and bloat and nothing word density of this. And now that this has happened twice, my great hope is that it happens 3 times, that it becomes a true trend, that actually in a world where all these AI sites are coming up and trying to make the internet a worse place to just extract some cheap ad money, hopefully we can get Glorbo into more of these sites, create more of a story, create a rallying point, right? Can you imagine 5 years in the future, we look back and there's a big Wikipedia entry about the Glorbo incident and how it was just a meme that went across a bunch of things that rallied support against this kind of AI-driven trash. That would actually be pretty dope. Next thing then, Valve. Oh boy, Team Fortress 2. I mean, do you want utter chaos? And speaking of Valve, Valve actually selected our game for a daily deal. And that actually does mean that it should be on your Steam homepage. If not, though, don't worry, because the 25% off discount is running for a total of 7 days. So you will have plenty of time to pick up the game at, you know, at a reduced cost. It's been pretty crazy. I mean, the daily deal is going to give you like maybe like weeks worth of sales within like a single day. It's absolutely crazy. If you would like to support what we're doing as well, we have also got a whole line of really cool like collector's edition merch that you can check out at store.bellular.games. Particularly, you know, picking up perhaps the art and the making of the Pale Beyond. There we go. I opened it up. We have a bunch of very satisfying penguins. Absolutely lovely penguins. Okay, so Team Fortress 2. Let's get back to the other bit about Valve. And if you want to watch yesterday's video, it does talk about like how the sausage is made with Steam and like the strategy of a game, so you might find that interesting too. Valve going big into Team Fortress 2 is very much literal. Number one, there was the summer update. It absolutely spiked their player count, like super impressively. It's a really massive patch, and that's actually enabled by how it is wrapping up a whole bunch of community content. But it really does seem to be a hit with the players, and now Valve have made it so that Team Fortress 2 community servers can have 100 player limits rather than the existing 32. That is rather mad. That is the scale of a full Battlefield game being stuffed onto 2Fort. And of course, in typical Valve fashion, they just threw out patch notes that said, added unrestricted_max players to raise the max player count to 100. Feature is unsupported and not recommended. Suffice to say, this has led to utter chaos and shenanigans. For me, you know, this game was just 2Fort. It is what I did. The idea that I could do 2Fort with 100 people is mad. You can certainly see, like, there are issues, even performance issues. But hey, perhaps we'll get community servers that can handle this, and maybe people will make something of it. There you go. We're one step away from the Team Fortress 2 100-player battle royale. I don't think that'll happen. Anyway, it's a ridiculous new toy. And finally then, we've got the game launch of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. A very interesting one, and it's one where, you know, I've seen a tweet from before Insomniac, I think, or whatever it was a tweet from Insomniac, and people kind of claiming, like, you said this can only run on a PS5, but actually you maybe had plans for like some other games to be in like other platforms or whatever. Now though, the rubber's actually met the road, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is playable on a Steam Deck with an SD card, which is kind of mental because the killer feature of the PS5 is its extremely high performance SSD situation, because with that, it's not only that the raw like file operations of its SSD are impressive, and you know they're impressive enough, but it's not just that. It's also like on the API level, right? It's like the ability to get that data slurped off and into RAM is real speedy, and that's what allows for the honestly quite magical looking thing of going through the rifts in that game and just seamlessly a whole new world just immediately appears. There's no loading, there's no nothing. It does actually feel like magic. It was the one time where, other than just more shinies, it felt like we'd experienced a generational leap. How then is it working on an SD card? Well, it is because it is a compromised version of the game that does not really meet their full design vision. But in a way, that's kind of okay. And of course, when I say that, evidently their design intent is that the rifts are this extremely seamless gameplay feature, right? But the thing is, the performance of the rifts is not particularly great on, on all forms of hardware. And just to bring up an example here from, of course, the wonderful people over at Digital Foundry, you can basically see on the left, right, we have got basically the left is PC, and you can see, right, the PS5, it is already through. The PS5 is completely seamless, yet you see that Ratchet is basically stuck in that Rift world for a small amount of time. It's the kind of thing you can certainly live with in gameplay, yes, but it's not as smooth as it is on the performance mode PS5, right? Now, we take a look, though, at Rich's PC, which certainly doesn't have all of the great tech. I think it might be on a hard drive, and on an old spinning disc, you can see that the game has performance issues, and then obviously on the Steam Deck off an SD card, you are just stuck there in that little Rift limbo land for a while. But the bit that matters, though, is you can play the game, and other than that, the Steam Deck port is, like, really quite impressive. And that's not something that I'm particularly surprised by, because this was done, right, by Nixies. Nixies are a very storied porting house. They're really quite amazing at porting, and of course they were acquired by Sony, quite evidently, to allow things like this to happen. Overall then, it's an impressive launch for a game that actually, yes, was straining some of the physical requirements that, did exist in the last generation. That being said, the other type of performance, sales performance, doesn't seem to be that big, right? We're looking at just shy of 9,000 all-time peak players in Steam, and hey, that's pretty good for like a single player game. And it's absolutely the case that like the mascot platformer isn't exactly, I suppose it is more of an action adventure game, but it doesn't seem to be the most entrenched thing over on the PC. Overall then, what we can do is we can take a look at other games that have came out from Sony. Of course, we got number one, right, with God of War. It had a peak of 73,000, 66,000 for Spider-Man Remastered, 56,000 Horizon. Even the very maligned Last of Us Part 1 port had 36,000. Days Gone, 27k. Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, which is a really good collection of games, 10k. And under that, we have Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. It's punching with Helldivers. To be honest, I would have thought that a Returnal would have done a little bit better. But anyway, that essentially is your situation for Sony. This is not a humongous launch here, but ultimately, this is an example of Nixies overcoming some problems, them getting better at what they're doing, and when you take a look at what Sony have got, oh, have they got stuff. Let's just talk about things they could bring onto PC, right? Gran Turismo, though the developers have downplayed the likelihood of that. We've got the first 3 Uncharted games. Okay, that's plenty of game. We've got Ghost of Tsushima. I think that is the one that would probably, in the PC audience, provide larger than Horizon numbers. Perhaps even, number 2 or number 3 for Sony. That would be big. Of course, The Order 1886. Remember that? There's, I guess, like The Last Guardian, Killzone, and oh yes, there's also a little tiny game. It's a small indie, you won't have heard of it, called Bloodborne. It's from this obscure developer that made like early 2000s like PlayStation 2 mech games. Yeah, I don't know, Bloodborne. But anyway, bullshit aside, I've covered a few times modders getting Bloodborne working at like a good resolution, 60 FPS. If you want to print all of the money that is in existence, people talk about Taylor Swift causing inflation whenever she goes to a country. I don't know. I don't know if Bloodborne will impact inflation, but it should. I'm happy to take 1 or 2% more inflation if it means I could get Bloodborne 4K 60 with good frame timings, goddammit. But now that the month draws to a close, thank you for all your support this month. And with all that said, have a brilliant day, and I'll see you next time.